Welcome back to Junction 119. This is Casen.
This is Kellan. He's got a Buckeye Nation hat on.
I do. I do.
It's like 2 weeks in a row where you're wearing Ohio State stuff on this show, kind of inexplicably. I don't know what this is. I don't like it.
Look, I'm leaning into the skid and I'm joining the Death Star that is going to be the Ohio State football program. Uh with the influx of NIL money and all the talent they're acquiring. I'm leaning into the skid and just going full steam ahead at joining the bandwagon here.
Is it the Death Star if like that's the team that lost most recently? I mean, I would think the Death Star would be Michigan right now.
Well, I mean the program's imploding. Like they're the Death
That's
Star because
true.
they're getting every transfer player on in the planet,
That's
and
true.
they're like they just got some bit. I don't know. They're potentially going to land like three of the top four cornerbacks in the next year recruiting class. It's the
Ohio
recruiting
State
for
is.
for Ohio State. Yeah,
Okay.
it's insane. So it's it's a different animal down here, or I guess up here for
Up
you.
there.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. Uh, the culture is quite something. But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I got you. Well, objectively speaking, it is a cool hat. I'll say the hat game is always strong on this show. I haven't debuted a new one in a while, but it's still just kind of keeping the rotation going. I got the pens today, but we're here. The AFC Championship and NFC Championships happened. We have a
Mhm.
relatively short rundown today. We're going to react to both championship games with their due reactions. We're going to bring you of the weeks and we're going to wrap it up. I had been teasing it along with you, Casen, for the listeners and other people. We're going to give you our anticipated movies of 2024. And I will talk about kind of the way I did that rather than the way we did it last year. Uh, when we get to it, but I figured this would be a good show to do it. Around when we don't have necessarily as many games to talk about, things like that, and give you
Mhm.
kind of a healthy dose of pop culture. And quite frankly, when we last did this case, and it was like our third or fourth ever show, of which I guess happy
Yeah,
1 year officially to the corner or to the almost to the sports corner. Shout out to the Junction.
yeah.
Yeah, officially we had 1 year pass. So that's pretty cool. Since we actually started our first recorded our
Mhm.
first show and put it out there for the public. So um yeah, we're gonna get into this, and you actually taught me about quite a few movies last year, dude. So hopefully we can get a little bit of that same thing going towards the back end of the show.
Yeah, yeah, and so we'll definitely focus on the games that happened on Sunday. We'll talk about those, and then we'll save our Super Bowl preview for next week since we have a little 2 week
Right.
gap here. So we can go ahead and get into that.
Yeah, let's go on and get into that. So we had two games happen, both with a healthy amount of drama. I honestly, two very good games. I got to say, they both really like showcased and brought like forth things that I didn't necessarily foresee coming. And we'll get into this, but we each got a pick right aside from our predictions last week. I got one.
So
I went 1-1, and you went 1-1.
let me be abundantly clear with that pick that I made. Um, I picked the way I did in hopes of jinxing both outcomes. So you picked the Chiefs and Lions. I also wanted the Chiefs and Lions in the Super Bowl, so I picked the Ravens and Niners, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I was trying to jinx it, and it worked for one of them. And should have worked. We'll get into that one, but the other game
Yep.
should have worked.
So the first game was last weekend. The final, the outcome was a Kansas City Chiefs at the Baltimore Ravens, where they defeated the Ravens 17-10. Was the final. Thoughts? And there's a lot here to unpack, and I don't necessarily think it has all to do with the Chiefs' dominance as much as it does a little bit of the playoff Lamar showed up, in my opinion. One of the best things about when we usually record our show is that the dust has long since settled on these games, the games themselves. The storylines kind of keep happening, but
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that the primary takeaway here is that there were a couple things that were, Lamar's fault, but obviously Lamar isn't the one who fumbled at the goal line. I mean, there were other people who generally had a lot of problems with that.
Say flowers.
And yeah. So to me, I think that this was just a general case of dudes who have been there before, know what it takes to get to the Super Bowl and to win it, and dudes who just have never been there,
Hmm.
and that have barely made it to this. And some guys maybe have made it to this point on other rosters, but like most of that team, drastically inexperienced compared to the Chiefs. Along with the fact that, I mean, John Harbaugh is a good coach, but Andy Reid is just significantly better.
You got two Hall of Fame coaches there.
It is what it is. I mean, the key to this game. I mean, I thought this was probably one of the more impressive games from the Chiefs because they all year. I mean, if they can win the Super Bowl, just say if they can win it, I will be mostly impressed with this season of all of their seasons because they've been able to really adapt and change as opposed to as to what matchup needs them to be.
Hmm.
Like they typically, when they had Tyreek, were, high flying, super fast paced offense and stuff. And with the limited weapons that they have, and now their number one weapon is Pacheco, they really utilize the ground game in a way they've never done before.
Yeah.
And so and you saw it in the time of possession. Like Kansas City possessed the ball for 37 minutes and 30 seconds compared to the Ravens 22 and 30 seconds. So I mean they were doubling up. I think they at one point they were like doubling up on them in time of possession. And it was incredible. Like the Ravens just didn't have time.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of parallels to how the Steelers beat the Ravens also by the same final score twice this year. I saw people saying Dan Orlovsky, like, no one's done this to the Ravens all year. It's like the Steelers did it to him twice, but that's fine. Beat them 17-10. I will say that I sat here and did a lot of gushing about the Ravens defense last week, and to be fair, they only let up 17 points, but the flip side is that they could only score 10 offensively, right?
Yeah.
For a multitude of reasons. And I don't know. I think that's the greatness. I think you might need to help me by looking this up, or I could kind of quickly do it here. But I think the other big story is the Chiefs' defense. I think the Chiefs
Yeah.
show that their defense is solid and they're a good enough complement to an offense that they know is going to get it done right to stifle a great offense in what the Ravens had most of this year. So much so, go ahead. You look like you're
No, yeah, no, you can
yeah, no, so
continue.
much so that they looked so different, and infinitely worse against the Chiefs than they did the Texans for a multitude of reasons. But yeah, I totally in a lot of ways there's been inevitable pacing comparisons, right? To could Mahomes catch Brady? That's like the big thing. I've said that if the Chiefs are able to win the Super Bowl, of which we're not predicting that this week, I think that you can almost look at this back to back. It would be back to back for the Chiefs, and you can almost look at it like Brady's 03-04. When they had already had
Mhm.
one under the belt. He was young. The nucleus is still there. They've had to kind of show that they can go through the adversity. They win the 03, and now they win in 04. They actually have the back to back with still so much of the career left. And yeah, I mean, this was the first game where I was like, I felt validated in picking the Chiefs. I just had this feeling of playoff Lamar is going to show up at some point. I mean, into Lamar's credit, he went 20 for 37, 270, 2 yards total. one interception and one touchdown. And I do think that unfortunately the narrative starts to creep in there of yet another quarterback in the AFC who is not going to win because partially because of well, more the case of Josh Allen in that he's directly competing with Mahomes for this era here. But Lamar, I think the Lamar, I'd say the issue is more that he, how do I put this? So what I was saying was Lamar is essentially, I think the narrative is slowly turned into that he just cannot actually perform in the playoffs on the big stage. And I think I think he was maybe one bigger performance away, but now he just took the best Ravens team he ever had and they completely fell apart against a team like the Chiefs. I think that's
Mhm.
partially to say for the Chiefs and partially a detriment to the legacy of Lamar straight up in this Ravens team. Because if he can't and not only that, quarterbacks like Lamar badly need a guy like him to get through and win the Super Bowl, like a
Yeah.
Vic style guy, for it to totally be validated in that whole narrative that he gets, pinned. He's just the latest guy. He's the latest run and gun quarterback from college who has fallen into a system where they're using him that way, right? He's the latest guy in that regard. They need him badly. They need that group of quarterbacks at college badly needs one of those guys to break through. And as of right now, I don't think Lamar's that guy. He can't even make it there. So there's a lot to take away from that. But I think the jury's the jury's back in now. I don't think the jury's still out. I think, yeah, like Lamar has this narrative to where him and this Ravens core can't get it done in the playoffs. I mean, they can't beat the
I
Steelers to
mean,
save their lives. So, I mean, that's just one guy's team.
I I mean, and the thing is that like I wouldn't even really say um that it was Lamar's fault. I mean I don't understand what their game plan was because like they were a run heavy team the entire year, and then they get to this game and they end up running for 81 yards
Yeah,
the entire game. Like what are you even doing? Like ran for 81 yards on 16 attempts for 5.1 yards per rush.
yeah. I mean,
It was working.
I
Running worked. They just didn't ever do it.
it's the like from time to time this happens in these big games, right? I have no idea what possessed them to completely go away from it. I have no clue. Um, I just the poor coaching, overthinking it, feeling like you have to go above and beyond or outside of the box in some absurd way to beat the Chiefs. I mean,
Yeah,
they
it felt
overthought
like
the
they went
situation.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah, they went in and they were like, okay, they're gonna expect us to run, so let's pass the whole game. And it was just like
yeah,
it didn't matter because Steve Spagnuolo ended up like blitzing Lamar every single play
yeah,
because they didn't have Willie Gay, who would have ended up being like the QB spy for Lamar. And so because they didn't have him, they just blitzed him the entire time
yeah.
to limit his as much as possible.
I will
And that seemingly worked.
I will say Lamar did give us maybe one of the greatest plays I've ever seen. It's just too bad. Like it will probably go.
Yeah.
So, obviously, the tip, he throws it, goes up, catches it himself. It is one of those situations where sort of like the reverse pass that Travis Kelce did earlier this year will go completely forgotten because ultimately they didn't win the game and such. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
it probably not among Baltimore fans, but I mean, it's like that would have been really cool, and they would play it again and again and again. They might even play it at the Hall of Fame ceremony, but they still lost that game. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there was probably 15 different ways the Ravens could have won this game. It's
Yeah.
just the story of what happened is in essentially the narrative of or is in the just the stats of the game flow. Like
Hmm.
you look at first, so you look at total yards. The Ravens actually had 336 yards compared to the Chiefs 319. So they outgained them during the game. They had 16 first downs compared to the Chiefs 22. So they had less first downs and they also had third down efficiency of 3 for 11
Mm.
compared to the 8 for 18. And the Chiefs had 5 first downs from penalties, and the Ravens had 0.
Yeah, I actually think
Oh,
the lack of their discipline is a whole other narrative in
I,
this
I I
because
mean I to me that game turned when you could feel the Ravens like getting frustrated,
mhm.
and you had Zay Flowers get that penalty for essentially like I don't know what he was doing, but when he just like threw that guy on the ground for absolutely zero reason,
Well,
and then
he
two
got the
plays
taunting
later,
penalty, which I thought was garbage. I mean, I thought like I'm a big proponent of like unless something is really really egregious, do not call taunting. It's the NFL. Um,
I did you not? It wasn't. I didn't think that he stared him down, and he threw him down to the ground. Like
it,
he basically like stepped on it.
no, it was an offensive play, and he was taken down, and then he stepped over him, and he looked and he stared him down. There was no throwing to the ground that took place,
I
in
I
my
from
opinion.
the video I saw, it looked like he like aggressively pushed him down, and or like forcefully got him down there, and that's where the taunting came in.
But either way, I mean, like, of course he draws that penalty, right? Of course the Ravens have that issue happen, and then of course you look even worse when I don't was it on the same drive that he
It
fumbled
it
it into
was
the
it
yeah
was like it was like 3 plays later.
right and of course he makes the giant blunder and then of course he goes to the sideline slams his helm slams his hand into the benches and he cuts him right just all around terrible looks, and not to mention just Lamar again. What throws a pick and throws his helmet immediately on the sideline. Like, I think even at one point, Casen, when I was watching the game, I made the joke of, "Hey, it's the way I see Lamar. It's the thing Lamar does every time he plays the Steelers, where I see him go to the sideline and I see him slam a helmet to the to the bench." Um,
Yeah.
I
Well,
know I'm rubbing that in, but like honestly, the formula to beat them's right there, and it's like the Chiefs just kind of did it perfectly while utilizing their
yeah.
own strengths and utilizing where the Ravens typically fall apart, which is in player discipline. So,
Right, exactly. And so like at that point in time, so when that play happened, Kansas City was up 17-7, but it felt like and the Chiefs were about to go in to make it 17-14. And it was like the Ravens,
The Ravens were, yeah.
sorry, yeah, the
Yeah,
Ravens
yeah,
the
yeah.
Ravens could have come within 3. They were very much still in that game, and it felt like the Ravens could dominate if they just put a drive together, and they almost had it. And then that play happens with the penalty, and then the fumble happens, and then after that, Zay Flowers, I don't know if he ever played again the rest of the game because he got injured, and so it's just kind of like everything fell apart on that one drive when
Hmm.
they were very much still in this, and then they only got a field goal the rest of the game.
And then then mentally, I mean, really, and then mentally they were cooked. And I want to go ahead and just say something else here because there's multiple people this kind of goes in response to. I'm one of these people who, and when it comes to the Super Bowl, the best team always wins it. It for what's this, the 58th Super Bowl, Casen?
Mm-hmm.
For 57 previous times, the same thing was the case. It's a results business, and that is what people see. Um, I saw so many people saying, technically speaking, the better team didn't win this game. I'm like, excuse me, mentally, you have to be tough as well. You have to be physically and mentally disciplined to win these games. And when it came right down to it, the second they hit adversity with a team that they were told by everybody that they should beat at home in the AFC Championship game, they lost. And they looked terrible, the Ravens. So clearly no, they were not the team that I and you had to hear about in the AFC North all year. Um, they got essentially embarrassed as well and couldn't handle the stage, and you have to
Yeah.
be mental. You have to have the mental fortitude to get this done. Everyone is aware of what the challenge is, and the team that meets that challenge, which is the best team in my opinion, always wins the Super Bowl. So
I the Ravens ended up losing at home to both of us this year.
both of us. Oh yeah, the Browns and
Yeah,
Steelers. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's just that it was very clear that they had problems of like actually winning games that they should be winning. Like if you look at their 4 losses, they lost to the Steelers. I mean, that was the last game of the year, but that Browns game was pretty bad. The other Steelers game, then the Colts. It was the Colts game. So it was essentially they can dominate teams that they should dominate, but they lose games that they should win very easily.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Like that's a coaching thing. Like
it is. And honestly, as a guy who's a fan of a team whose coach is consistently said, they play down to competition. Not necessarily always the case in Baltimore, but I mean, I like to hear a bit more noise in Harbaugh's direction on that regard, especially if they continue to keep getting to the playoffs with this core and losing and bombing out
well,
hilariously.
I mean, and we can get to that, but it's just like we'll see if they get back here because
Right.
I mean that defense isn't the same anymore. I mean, we'll see, and Lamar's deal is kicking in, and
Right.
so
We'll touch on some of
tough
the end of the coaching carousel happened actually literally today. It's Thursday,
today.
the day we're doing. So we're gonna talk. Let's talk about that before we jump into of the weeks. Um, Bottom line, I will say that I really I'll say this because it's about this game. One other narrative that's been annoying this week has been the whole Swift thing, and it's been a narrative all year, but I think it's kind of come to it's like boiling over this week because they've made it to the Super Bowl and now it's like, oh, we got to have that,
Mm-hmm.
Swift's gonna be on this, screen or whatever. I'm over here like completely indifferent. It doesn't bother me, nor do I like really like care positively. It's kind of like, look, they're the best team. This just so happens
I
to be another narrative attached to them. But the Times, it's interesting because the Times did come out with the article where they actually measured it, and she was only showed 24 seconds, and then they went down the games that since they became like an item with Travis Kelce, and they said it's never more than like 30 seconds. So I don't know.
yeah, I
I
he,
I have a theory
he
about this, but you can go ahead.
my thing about that is that literally every single thing that I see talking about like her is just people complaining about it. I don't there no one is talking about this beyond the people complaining about people talking about her.
Well,
Like if
and then the other side are
unless you are looking for it, you don't see it or hear it.
the other
Like
side are actual Swifties who are happy about it.
that's what I'm saying is that
Yeah,
if you're not seeking that out, you don't have to hear about it.
I
But
agree.
everybody's just complaining about it, and so it's like the only people I ever see talking about it are the people complaining about it, and I'm
Well,
like,
I
what?
well, my one thing about it is I do understand where the anger comes from. It's really no different than like the Brady and Giselle days. I'm serious. It really isn't. You have
I
very you
it,
have
it's
very you have very
yeah,
successful, rich, very rich and successful people who in no way have normal lives, right? Who are very, very good at something and they're perceived as better than you. I mean, it's literally no different. And it's to me, it's like, well, whatever. You know what I mean? I got if you're worried enough to let that like really ruin your whole football life, you know what I mean? Um, yeah, obviously I'm not one of those people, but like I'm sitting here saying I understand where that anger comes from because it's literally no different than when like Brady was at the top when he was younger. I mean, it's a similar kind of like they're winning and it seems that like everything is converging in their direction. You know what I mean? There as in the Chiefs. You know what I mean? Um yeah, I think it comes from there and quite frankly, I'm just here to say, I guess, get over it because I think we're gonna have to deal with this for quite a long time, um, as a society slash NFL fans.
yeah. I mean yeah, like outside of like the first 2 weeks when it was like a new thing for the league, and there were some definite like overboard decisions being made with the production of pregame shows and certain things that were have graphics mid-game, things like that. Like after that, and they realized they kind of had to scale it back. Like it's nothing on the actual broadcast beyond her being shown equal amount of time as any other player's girlfriend or wife. Like
Definitely, that's definitely not true what you just said. But like,
star player. I mean, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Star player.
there you go, there you go.
They cut to
After a
Jake Browning's
score,
girlfriend like
yeah,
5 times.
after a
Like
score,
a,
yep.
any quarterback or the superstar skill player, their wife or girlfriend is getting shown,
If if if
50
it's
seconds.
if it's aware where they are and who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I think
yeah.
that is true. Phrasing a little bit more like that is very true. I think part of this also boiled over because the Chiefs have actually made it to another Super Bowl on a year where they're down. I
Yeah,
think it's
I
like
think people are just mad.
are
Yeah,
just
people are just
mad. Yeah.
mad that the Chiefs won. Yeah.
It's like, well,
Okay.
I told you this was going to happen last week, but um, regardless, I mean, hey, this is how it's going, right? I mean, uh, it's just something that I find humorous whenever this happens as a society because I think it says way more about our it's when these things in society and pop culture intersect, right? It's literally what our show is, which is why I wanted to make sure I brought it up before we moved off this game, and I'm sure we'll have more to talk about when we're actually predicting the game next week. Uh,
Yeah. We'll
so
we'll talk a lot more about that next
either
week.
way, though, Chiefs are the AFC champions yet again. And with that, we can move to the NFC Championship game, which took place out west between, well, what was adopted America's team this postseason anyway, the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers, where the 49ers bested the Lions 34-31. A true tale of two halves. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, my goodness. Truly and I'm glad I saw the meme. I'm really glad I saw the meme because Kittle actually leaned into it after the game in the post game preference. They had us in the first half. I'm not gonna lie. I love that Kittle actually said that on the stage because I'm like, I mean, they did. that was really looking good for Lions fans for about 30 minutes, in 30 in-game football minutes. Anyway, um, I don't know. The big narrative that this is all Dan Campbell's fault this week, I just don't agree with. Um, I think he's unfairly taken it in the teeth this week. I mean, as you know, we know he's an aggressive play caller. That's part of the reason why the Lions are here, by the way. I mean, thoughts on that to start?
So to start, yeah, I think that there's to me, I think that definitely partially he is to blame for sure
Yeah,
for the decisions that he made as far as going for it. I understood going for it the first time when they ended up turning it over on 4th and 2 at the 28. That ended up being, it was 24-10. I understood that because if you score there, you can go up 31-10, and that's some more cushion. But to me, the more egregious problem was turning it over on downs when you were down 24-27 and you needed that field goal to tie it. However,
that's the one.
however,
Yeah,
however, he didn't trust his kicker. Like they were already on their second kicker, and he just really was not accurate from that far out. I mean, I think it would have ended up being um like 45 or at least 45 yards, and he just isn't that accurate from 45. And so I think I mean, as much as the call he probably, because I think you saw a lot of like questioning, I think, in some of those decisions with him. And I think that he really probably wanted to, but I just don't think that he trusted the kicker to be able to do that. And
mm,
so I, I mean, we're not even having this conversation if they could execute it. So it's just like
well, that's true.
there's part of it. So some of it is on Ben Johnson for not being able to call a play that can be executed on either one
Well,
of those.
I was
Some of
gonna
that's on the players for not doing it.
I was
Like,
gonna say like there's more blame to go around if you really want to talk if like that's what we do when teams lose, right? It's place
yeah.
blame. We have to place blame. The one thing I will say is I think it's also more Dan Campbell putting trust in his offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who has elected to remain with Detroit. By the way, I wanted to interject that into this conversation because that was some
Mhm.
pretty significant news this week that I thought to myself, that guy's kind of an offensive genius, and he's staying with Dan Campbell at least another year. Um, Incredible news for Lions fans, and honestly, for what the jobs were that were left, maybe a great move for him career wise. But anyway, just
Yeah,
mentioning
we'll get
that.
in that.
We'll get into that, but I mean, we kind of just mentioned that if you want to mention anything more of it, but either way, I do agree with you there. I think there was some more maybe a trust in put it in Jared Goff's hands rather than your kicker's foot, so to speak. But regardless, I do think the narrative also has to be that the Niners woke up. I mean, honestly, they made second half adjustments. They made the Lions look
Yeah.
bad in the second half. I mean, they forced multiple turnovers. I mean, it was like they not only that, but like they had the wherewithal for that. That was there. There was an incredible catch. Instead of going off, it went off goes off the line defender's face mask. Then they catch it for a touchdown. I mean, everything went the Niners' direction in the second half, and they were firing on every single cylinder we've seen them fire on. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
that's why it what pains me for Lions fans is just that it really felt like they had their boot on the throat. But at the same time, there was a whole half left, and guys on their sideline were like waving goodbye to the crowd. And I was like, maybe don't do that to the Niners.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember thinking that at the time. I was like, maybe don't do that quite yet. There's a whole half left, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and to
Yeah,
be fair, there's a lot of blame that goes on Aaron Glenn's feet too. I
yeah.
mean, you let me read you the second half Niners possessions.
Mm-hmm.
Field goal, touchdown, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, downs, end of game. So yeah, you just needed to get one stop in that half, and they could not do it.
And to be fair,
I mean, some
they
of it
had some bad luck. They had some bad luck.
some of it was that fluky stuff, like
If
that
that
IU
touch,
catch.
if
Yeah,
that pick happens, I really think we're having a different conversation.
yeah.
No.
Oh, well, even if it's just incomplete,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he just even if he just doesn't catch it,
Yeah, that makes one of the greatest catches in franchise history. I'm sure. Um,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, and it's I don't know. This one really made me feel bad just because for as great a story as the Lions have had, it's like of course the juggernaut team wins. Of course
yeah,
it just that like that one bummed me out more than the other result just because at the end of the day it was hilarious to see the Ravens lose. I was pained to see the Lions lose in the way they lost. I almost would have rather them just get destroyed than and have no chance from the jump rather than look as good as they looked in the first half. I mean, I that whole first half, I'll tell you what, man, they were cooking with gas. I was like, man,
yeah.
these guys are really going to
I
do it.
to me to me this game was lost in in that time period at towards the end of the third when so it was basically the third quarter really because it
Mhm.
was the Niners get the ball out of half, they get a field goal, and then the Lions end up turning it over on downs, and then the Niners go back, get a touchdown, and then on the first play the Lions fumble it back, and then they get
Exactly.
another touchdown, and so that's essentially 17. Yeah, that's like yeah, that's 17 unanswered points, and the Lions just couldn't do anything about that at
No.
all.
And also the Lions, like, while I'll say the Lions at no point quit in the game, you could tell there was a little bit of shell shockness,
Mhm.
of what had taken place, in that in that very quick series. I mean, just you're on top of the world, and then they come right back out, and it's like everything's falling apart immediately. That's just such a swing,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
momentum when
And,
it
and,
happens
and
to
I
you.
mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, like what you were saying, was you saw CJ Gardner Johnson, waving goodbye to the San
That
Francisco
was
fans in the second quarter.
yeah, that
And
was
so
just
they went into the locker room planning their parade. And,
yeah.
and so they can't I'm not gonna say who's to blame for it, but it's just that's definitely a recurring theme with the lot with particularly CJ Gardner Johnson. It's one of the people of like they go in a locker room at halftime, start planning the parade route when they get back to Detroit, and then they come out. They forget they still have another half to play, and
Well,
so they come out third, still asleep from halftime.
well, hang on. Planning the parade means that they've already won the Super Bowl in their head. I think they were at least already thinking about the trip to Vegas.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't
Maybe
know.
not. I don't know either, man.
Mm,
Look, either way, I really think the better team did win this game when it came right down
yeah.
to it. I mean, they woke up that the Niners looked every bit as good as advertised. Similar, I will say this, it took an effort similar to how they beat the Packers to beat the Lions. It took some kind of second half heroics, really. And really, I wouldn't even say heroics. It took some second half execution. Like, let's just go out and do what we know we can do. And it's like
Hmm.
once they saw where the bar to beat them was, they were like, "Oh, we'll get there," you know. And
Yeah.
they made it look
I
easy.
mean, and to the Niners' credit, like They came in with a lot of I mean I was surprised at how flat they came out to begin
Yeah,
the game,
that was shocking.
but
Yeah.
they managed to wake up and win, but it's just kind of like you came in expecting them to be hot and fired up because they were so they took losing last year so personally
Mhm.
because they thought it was they thought it was a fluke. It shouldn't really be held against them as far as like what they're capable of doing because they didn't have a quarterback for 3 quarters of the game.
They didn't have a lot of positions. You know what I mean? I mean, I just kept
So
thinking there is no way that this 49ers team should with being as healthy as they are, that this should be happening, which is why again, for about a half, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is gonna be hilarious. They're gonna blow it again. And I thought to myself, oh no, the moment's too big. But no, the moment was too big for the Lions, it turned out. So
yeah,
so
unfortunately.
so unfortunately, yes. So the result is that we get a rematch of the Super Bowl that actually got Mahomes his first one with Andy Reid back in, I want to say it was 2020. It was
It
the
was
end of the
2020. Yep.
1920 season because yes, knock on wood now, about a month after that Super Bowl happened, a major world event took place. So
Yeah.
with these two teams playing in it
Yep.
with a lot of the
I mean,
same players.
realistically, we were a game away from having this be a rematch last year.
Yeah, we were same two teams. I mean, let's face it, these have been the two most consistent and dominant teams in their respective conferences for the last 5 years.
Hmm.
For various reasons. It's funny to me that the Niners have been this close, and it's funny because every other position came through except the quarterback, and now it seems like they have a guy who at least can manage what's going on, right? Um, I will say this, not talking too much about the Super Bowl yet, but the again, just the legacy of this two, the legacies are just so the opposite of each other in this matchup. I mean, one is someone adding to an already dominant legacy. I mean, Mahomes is one of those guys where his career could end right now and he's already a Hall of Famer. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, but obviously he's climbing the ladder to try and maybe become consideration of the GOAT, right? Those comparisons are already happening. If Purdy's able to do it, I mean, not only do you beat one of this legend, he's the guy who took some shine away from a potential Super Bowl of Mahomes because Brady's the only guy who's done that so far, right? And
I'm pretty sure Brady's the only person who's ever beat Mahomes in the playoffs
I'm pretty sure that you are correct since he's been a starter.
because his first year was the AFC Championship game, and then the Super Bowl that they lost.
Which doing a little thought experiment, not to get too much into the game until next week. Let's say hypothetically Mahomes does go on to win like 7, right? It'll be interesting when we look back years from now when we're well into our adulthood, middle ages case, and it's like, wow, like you could call this guy, you could call Mahomes the GOAT, and then like the other guy who's the GOAT is the only reason he doesn't have one more Super Bowl. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Brady's seventh was the one who took him, who took some shine out of there. Just like how there were
Hmm.
guys who prevented Brady from having more, right?
Hmm.
So anyway, just thinking about that narrative, but it's just kind of cool to think already that Purdy has a chance to be one of those guys. Um, I've even heard people say this era, like Mahomes needs an Eli, like he needs an Eli Manning. He needs someone in the NFC who can go toe to toe with him in the Super Bowl and somehow beat him. He needs he needs an antagonist, and we all need a protagonist. Um, who knows? I mean, maybe we'll see something like that take place at some point. But any other thoughts on the NFC Championship game?
um, no, yeah, I mean, I think that was generally it.
Let's get to the carousel.
Yeah, yeah. So to summarize, we got the NFL coaching carousel that basically just finished today. Um, to summarize it, like where we've been: Chargers, Jim Harbaugh; Raiders, Antonio Pierce; Patriots, Gerard Mayo; Titans, Brian Callahan; Panthers, Dave Canales; and Falcons, Raheem Morris. And so in the last week, in the last couple of days, the Seahawks have hired Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald,
Mm-hmm.
which I love this for the Seahawks, my Seahawks. Um, the because I think I've said that on here before. Mike McDonald's the Shanahan killer. Like
Yeah.
his defense has shut down Shanahan and Shanahan disciples offenses all season long.
including this
And
year.
I mean he managed to get he beat they they went into San Francisco and beat them soundly about a month ago, and they shut down the Dolphins and the Texans, all guys who come from Shanahan's tree. And so the Seahawks being a divisional rival of Shanahan, I think, is probably going to keep him up all night, or keep him up at night during the summer. Him trying to deal with that. But
Yep.
I thought it was a good hire for them. We'll see how he's as a head coach, but defensively, he's a really good coordinator.
Yeah, I thought this was a really sound hire too for a lot of those same reasons. I mean, I was remembering what you had said about him too, and I thought to myself, oh, now he's in the division with these guys. And I think if you're a Seahawks fan, you should really be excited for that hire. I really think that's solid,
Mhm.
especially with a really healthy nucleus in that building with that Carroll leaves behind. Yeah, he's a proven guy. The Ravens defense is incredible, obviously, and it's built to counteract a lot of these incredible defenses that we've started, or defensive offenses that we've started to see the game become a lot more offensive, right? Um, the other bit of news was Dan Quinn was hired as the head coach of the Washington Commanders,
Yeah. So
officially capping like there are no jobs left. Belichick did not get
mhm.
a job. We'll talk about that in a second. Any thoughts on the Quinn hire?
Yeah. So the Commanders situation was sort of drama filled because they interviewed a ton of people. They didn't even really interview Vrabel or Belichick that much. I don't think they weren't really high on
No,
their list. And the big thing was that it felt like Ben Johnson was their number one target, and Ben Johnson turned them down yesterday.
said no. Yep,
Um, of which
he turned
you
everybody
had you
down.
you you had Schefter basically caping for the Commanders and say that it was the Commanders were mad because he texted them while they were en route to Detroit for another interview. And so they were super annoyed about that. I don't know. It was just weird. Like I think that was just them um trying to, direct the attention away from them for not being able to attract him. Like, I think this says more about the fact that he didn't want to go to a bad job.
Yeah,
Like, Ben Johnson has been told by so many people, I'm sure, do not just go to any job. And there are potentially some very good jobs opening up next year. If you look in Philly, in Dallas, maybe in Chicago, like there are some better jobs than the Commanders that will likely open up next season. And so and credit to him, he's probably like, look, we're very close to being able to go to the Super Bowl. Like, I mean, they're going to have more draft picks to add. I mean, I don't think they're really losing much. So I think that they have a chance to be right back in it
no,
next year. And I don't think he wants to lose that to rebuild a mediocre franchise.
the Lions are weirdly in a really good cap spot. I mean, like, I say weirdly because like Goff is on the deal he's
I
on, but
think I think his deal's expiring, but I'm sure he'll take a team friendly deal because he knows what he is.
right,
And I think he likes being there. So he'll take a deal that is probably,
he's not gonna
essentially it's essentially probably franchise tag level
he's not
cap
gonna
hit.
take a deal that's gonna cripple the squad that has
Yeah.
very much made him and given him a second chance, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
especially if there's a chance that we can actually go through and break through and do this, and maybe
Yeah.
this game happens in Ford Field next year, because
Yeah.
honestly, a result here or there, they could have been the one seed this year, and they absolutely are good enough to. You give them another year draft pick. I mean, I'd be sitting there
Yeah.
saying, let's give it another ride, let's do it, you know. And then if I want to do that next year,
I mean, if they have that Cowboys game, they probably would have been the one seed.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And arguably they should have had it, right? As we
Yeah.
talked about. So um water under the bridge now, but I honestly commend Ben Johnson a lot for one, knowing his worth, but also saying, you know what? No, I one, I'll wait for a better job, but also I like being a part of this staff. I don't want to leave yet.
Hmm.
Let's go again, you know?
Which so out of these hires, which one do you like the most in terms of fit,
Now,
potential?
do you mean out of all of the ones we've seen? Or do you
Out
mean
of the ones that we just said, the ones that have happened this cycle. Yeah.
honestly, I don't want to rehash it, but I really like the Falcons hire.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
Remind me the name. I'm trying to think here.
Raheem Morris.
Raheem Morris. That's right. I was trying to get my ones here. I think he's the most. I think he could probably come in and have the most immediate impact. I think the rest of these, I Harbaugh's a great coach. Don't get me wrong, but I think the Chargers have still a lot of questions. Essentially, it'll be interesting to see him back on in the NFL nucleus and also on the West Coast. I mean, if he can really grab a hold of that, that's the case. But I will say that depending on how the draft goes, I really think that Raheem Morris could come in and have maybe the most immediate impact, mainly because that division is just awful. And if they can figure out a way to
Hmm.
get the Atlanta nucleus in a way to where they can go head toe to toe with again a 9-8 Tampa team that won the division. Yeah, I just think that
I've
they
got a
have
theory.
success. Yeah,
I've got a theory, and so let me talk to this theory.
sure,
I think the best hire in this I might end up actually being Brian Callahan.
interesting. What's your theory?
So this could be woefully wrong, but I'm just gonna spit out this hot take. I think Zach Taylor is a Brian Callahan merchant, and
Mm,
so Brian Callahan leaves. They're gonna be stuck trying to fill what they're losing on hit with him as an offense coordinator. So I think Joe Burrow is gonna end up looking bad. The Bengals are gonna be terrible again next year, even with Joe Burrow.
mm,
Zach Taylor gets fired. Like I think there's a potential because Zach Taylor he was like the Rams quarterback coach, and so he was like super inexperienced to begin with. And I mean I just have yet to see a ton of evidence that this was actually being driven by him as far as
interesting.
like the Burrow success. And so I think it's entirely plausible that like the only reason that they were able to be that good, it just walked out the building.
Well, hang on a second. I was looking at this from the side of who can come in and immediately make their team like the best, like immediately,
Well,
which
that's what I'm saying, and and
right.
I and
Well,
I think we've been underrating how good of a coach he is.
right. You
Yeah.
just really made the argument of who is more of a detriment to leaving their respective location. That's really what you said. You could be right. I mean, I I I think that could still happen even if he doesn't have immediate success in Nashville. Is that fair to say? So I can absolutely. I
Yeah.
think it's more
Yeah.
likely what you just said will happen than maybe he goes in and immediately has success because there were a lot of issues in Cincy this year that I think like could be the beginning of I don't want to say the end, but the beginning of really like the downfall where you know
Hmm.
Burrow goes by way of Andrew Luck. I'm not saying that I want that to happen by any means, but at the same time, let's face it, they're not a franchise that makes sound personnel decisions. At least historically, they haven't been. So
Hmm.
that's an interesting theory, Casen. That could be the most
Yeah.
detrimental. That could be the most detrimental exit of this carousel.
Good call. But yeah, I mean, as far as immediate success, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a very good chance that Harbaugh walks in and the Chargers end up like winning
Incredible.
11, 12 games
Well,
easily.
let me just say this. It would be great. It would be so great. I think we would all agree if an actual quote unquote Chiefs killer were to actually enter their division. Because
Hmm.
that's one of the things that that's one of the things that marred the entire not marred, but was a testament to the entire Brady era was that no one in that division besides the Patriots could get it together for like 20 years, you know? And like a decade and a half. And of course, so when they win that division every year, they get those 6 games, and then they're the number one seed anyway. They're 2 wins from the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? It's like, of
Yeah.
course, you know. So that was always just so annoying. And it would be great if someone in that division could give the Chiefs a real run for their money. It would be awesome if it were Herbert, just to make the road more difficult for a team that clearly needs it. You know.
Yeah.
Um.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, and for what it's worth, I mean, if you look at that division, the Broncos are the Broncos and they have their problems, but you take Sean Payton, a really sound winning coach with a Super Bowl, and you look at Harbaugh, a really good coach that's been to a Super Bowl, has a
Hmm.
national championship. Like so, I mean, we'll see what Antonio Pierce can do in Vegas, but this isn't the AFC East during the Patriots time. Like this is going to be a brutal division
I
for
agree.
them to have to win.
It already still is better than the East was back then. So
Yeah.
with the Raiders and the Raiders trying to do what they can and the Broncos attempting to play football, but
Mm.
uh, So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the that's my 2 cents on. I like that. I like you say Harbaugh, I say the Falcons. So yeah, I like that theory. I like whenever you theorize, throw things out there. Stick a pin in that one.
Yeah,
When
we'll
football
come back
season
to that
comes
in
back
September.
around,
Yeah,
a whole a
yeah,
whole half a year from now, 3/4 of a year from now. Ready for of the weeks?
yeah. Let's get into it.
All right, why don't you start off? Because I don't have a whole lot of the weeks this week,
Okay.
but I do have a few I can say.
Yeah. So today, obviously the biggest news of the day, if anybody was on Twitter, I'm sure maybe you heard about it. I've got free agency of the week, and that goes to Lewis Hamilton, has I guess triggered a clause in his contract to become a free agent driver. He's leaving Mercedes racing and he's going to Ferrari.
Yeah,
Anybody who knows anything about Formula One, Lewis Hamilton's one of the best drivers ever to race in Formula One, and he is going to the he's going to Ferrari. A really interesting like sort of NFL equivalent that I can see people say is this is kind of like Brady going to the Buccaneers.
yeah.
Like it's sort of like somebody that is leaving a racing team that has had a lot of success, and he's had a lot of success with them, and he's going to a racing team that hasn't really been that relevant lately, but they've had success in the past. If anybody knows the name Michael Schumacher, he won a ton with Ferrari, and they haven't really been relevant since. So yeah, very, very interesting development in the Formula One space.
Now here's a question for you: Has he given any kind of indication as to why he's hopping from obviously the well-known Ferrari to, of course, the German team, the German car maker Mercedes?
I haven't seen why. Maybe he has, but I haven't seen why. But I remember I have a friend who's a huge Lewis Hamilton fan, and I remember, and I think he's been saying that he's been sort of discontent for a while,
Interesting. Okay.
because he's yeah, I think that there were issues. Mercedes, he hasn't won a lot in the last like year or two because Mercedes like constructors have been really they like their engines have not been as good as they were before,
Ferrari, you
and
mean?
so Mercedes,
Oh, Mercedes.
and
Oh, okay.
Lewis has sort of taken a step back, and the Mercedes engines have sort of kind of fallen off, and I think he's not super enthused about staying there. Um,
So is he going to
so
Ferrari or Mercedes?
he's going to Ferrari.
There it is.
So
Okay, I was
he's
confused. I was confused about
yeah.
that. So he's currently with Mercedes, according
So
to.
so
Okay.
it really interesting stuff. I mean,
So what's interesting is, for some context here, he's a 7-time champion, but he hasn't won a
mhm,
championship since 2020. That breeds some stagnation when you consider that
yeah.
4 years, 5 years is a long time in any sport, but especially Formula One.
Yeah, and so it sort of happened where he's sort of been always coming in second to Verstappen, who Max Verstappen is on Red Bull, but yeah, it's very interesting. We'll see how this goes. Something that's weird about how this kind of took place is that like he's still technically racing with Mercedes until December. Like so
Of
the way
this
that this
year?
happened, yes. So
Wow.
he's still racing with Mercedes for the 24 season, and in 25 he's racing with Ferrari. And it's weird that like he announced this a year before this is even happening. But I don't get Formula One free agency. I don't get it, but it's just very interesting that he's going to spend a year with like
That's
as
funny.
a lame duck with these people.
Real quick,
But
for some
mm,
context, this man is 39 years old and his birthday is January 7th. Okay. Which means
yeah,
he will be 40 before he is suiting up with Ferrari. Uh, it just, and doing
yeah.
that, and that's kind of like, wow, you're doing that a whole year in advance. Now, maybe that's a contractual normal thing. You can tell us out there. Maybe you
I
have a friend who's a Formula
for
One guy who can kind of weigh in on the situation to educate. I'm not going to sit here and
for
pretend like I know.
for anybody that just wants some sort of reference, there are two drivers in the world that have 7 Formula One championships. Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton.
Got it.
So he is the second best driver. It's always like an argument over like who's the GOAT of Formula One. It's Schumacher or Hamilton. Like those are the two people.
It's like
Uh,
I mean, more recently, it's like Ronaldo and Messi. Like it's the same.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's
And I mean, if anybody doesn't know anything about Michael Schumacher, he won 7 titles from 94 to 2004. And 5 of them were from 2000. He went 2000 to 2004, like in a row. So he won 5 in a row, basically. And he ended up getting into a ski accident, like 15 years ago. And he's essentially been like kind of in a semi coma for since then.
wow.
And like nobody's seen him since the accident happened. Like he's been in a home basically since that happened. And his family has like not ever talked about it since.
I did
But
not
it's
know
like
that.
it's like super crazy of how that situation went down. Um but Michael Schumacher, I if you don't know, I we had in Italian exchange student live with us when I was in fourth grade. Shout out Marco. And so that was about 2007.
Awesome.
And so this would have been right after Michael Schumacher won 5 in a row. And so he came to live with us, and he was a huge Ferrari fan. And because this would have been like, obviously being like a Patriots fan in peak Brady days.
Yeah,
And
I
so
mean,
it
yeah,
was it was like it was a huge deal. And so uh I've always, been super aware of Schumacher and stuff. And so the this would be I guess trying to equate it into NFL terms, like as far as the franchise status, think of like um think of like Brady. I get yeah, like think of it like somebody like Brady going to uh going to the Niners, where like they've won a ton as like a team, and he's won a ton, and they've had guys who've won a ton before him. So yeah, Ferrari, I think, is a brand that deserves to be huge as a racing team.
I agree. I agree. That's awesome. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I mean, that's not you always surprise me with what we're actually gonna like get into and talk about. So hopefully I sounded at least somewhat coherent in talking about it. But genuinely had not I had kind of seen that, but the context of what that all means now makes perfect sense today. So I'll just go ahead and just quickly interject and say that my upset of the week was the Chiefs because they were an underdog. That was my
Yeah.
upset of the week. The one that made the most noise, so to speak. But for another of the week, this is a cool thing. I was like, okay, this could be the sports event intro of the week slash of the week when it happens for the Super Bowl. But CBS has confirmed that SpongeBob will perform "Sweet Victory" to kick off Nickelodeon's first ever Super Bowl broadcast. There's so much to unpack
Yeah.
with this, but the one thing I was
Yeah.
like, first of all, that's incredible. And that's the only way to begin a Super Bowl, quote unquote, bubble bowl broadcast, if you're actually going to put that. The other thing, though, was I think it's kind of amazing that like Viacom and like CBS are actually doing a Nickelodeon Super Bowl broadcast. Like, I think that's kind of amazing. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
they've
They
been
they
building it
they've
up to it.
really been building up to it with the slime time stuff,
Yeah.
the Nickelodeon playoff games that they've had before with the and regular season games too with the MVP. Um and I mean I love the Super Bowl rotations and how each different network sort of puts their own spin on it.
Yeah.
And I think CBS and Viacom are putting forth something really funny with that.
They are, but also another thing comes to mind for me, dude, is like this is exactly why you had Disney experimenting with the whole Toy Story game, right?
Hmm.
This is, there is clearly a market for this, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that we'll see the Super Bowl on a streaming service at some point, but I can absolutely. Well, the one thing the NFL has yet to do, and I don't think they'll ever do it, is they've never given ESPN the Super Bowl. And they won't do that because you would never want to put the Super Bowl on anything that isn't like the public access, right? In other words, they're not going to put the Super Bowl technically on cable.
Are they? I thought they were going to. Well, I thought they were at least going to simulcast it on ESPN when ABC has it.
Mm, you might be right about that, but it's still on ABC.
Yeah.
And they would never give it by itself in a solo situation there. And honestly, when it's on ABC, they might you can look that up, but they honestly might also go like their extra casts with that because each subsidiary company kind of has their own little shtick, right? But regardless, I think that's something to look forward to, and that's definitely going to be among other things. The How do I put this? That's going to be a viral moment in itself. The night of the Super Bowl. So no question.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. I think that'll be very, very, very entertaining.
Yes, it will be.
Um,
What you got?
so I have I'm trying to okay. I was trying to think about of how to say this appropriately for the show here. Okay,
Be
I
careful.
have Quitter of the week, and that goes to now former head coach of the Boston College football program, Jeff Hafley.
Interesting.
Um, Jeff Hafley was head coach of Boston College 6 days ago, and he is now the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers.
Wow. Okay.
And he basically said that he quit because he hates NIL. He hates the way that the sport is changing. He just wants to coach football. He doesn't want to deal with all this NIL recruiting stuff that they have to deal with in college.
Yeah, I'm looking here. It looks like that he blindsided them with this news, and that's I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you don't expect to have. I mean, it's beginning of February. You don't quite expect your football coach to leave in this regard. In that way, he had been at Boston College for, from the looks of it, 3 seasons, and
Yep.
that is pretty fascinating when you consider. I mean, I think what's bigger is that's almost like a counter to kind of what we've been talking about. Halfley is 44. That's why I was quickly looking him up here because we had that whole segment where we were talking about all the young guys influxing into the game. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe I mean he's not like young, but I mean like he is still in his 40s, early 40s, and so that's interesting. I mean, just kind of looking through here too. He was in the NFL before. He was with
Mm-hmm.
the 49ers, with the Browns, and the Buccaneers, and this is a straight up DC job. So
Jeff Hafley was at Ohio State with Ryan Day,
that's
and then
right.
he
Yep.
he parlayed that to the BC job. Um, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, it's just I haven't ever seen anybody under the age of 70 threaten to quit because of NIL. Like, I mean, like this is like a Dabo level. Like, I hate this. I'm getting out of the sport.
Get off
Like,
my lawn.
dude, you're like, I hate a sport where we have to pay to get players to come play for us. So I'm going to go to the NFL. Like,
Well, I mean,
I,
I know, right? Good or the other. I mean, it's a business, right? But I will say this: I do think stick a pin in this in the sense of this isn't just older coaches getting annoyed by this or burning out. It isn't just that. You know what I mean? It's these. You could see some younger coaches too, like him.
I I think I will okay. I know what he's getting at, and I think the problem is programs like BC, like Syracuse, like any other middle to bottom tier program in a power conference is stuck, unable to do anything, playing these behemoth programs that like in Ohio State or whatever, pay millions of dollars every year for
Sure.
NIL, for recruits, for everything. And so, I, I mean, it's going to lead to another realignment again. And I mean, it's going to get to the point where like there's the only people like where you just separate out like your Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan. They're all just together in like a different tier of league, and then everybody else is back to what we thought was college athletics.
Almost comes off
Um,
like the NCHC in hockey. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
which regionally is kind of that way, but it just feels like that's just a loaded conference with everything. I mean,
Well, it's sort of like that anyway. It's sort of like that definitely where if you look at it like Boston College is the Miami of the ACC, if you compare it that way, where it's just kind of like, what are they going to do? Like they're not a football school. Nobody's going there, super willingly to play football.
Yeah.
Especially in a conference when with Clemson and Florida State and even
Uh,
even Duke.
to piggyback off of what you just said, I just think it's the latest example of how the ACC could be in serious trouble. But
Yeah,
regardless, I'll leave it at that. I have one last of the week. I didn't really have a whole lot this week, but I just wanted to mention it because the Pro Bowl games are this weekend. I don't know if it's necessarily an of the week, more of like a hey, hopefully you fixed this of the week. And that's the Pro Bowl. I've really enjoyed kind of the skills and the stuff that they've done this past few years with the flag football game and everything else. And maybe matchup of the week is the Manning brothers going against each other as the coaches of these two teams. Um, I fixing the Pro Bowl is kind of neither here nor there. The Pro Bowl as it is now is not what it was. I like the idea of it being an all-star, like they've turned the NFL's all-star weekend into an actual weekend rather than it's just like one game. So it's similar to the NHL, NBA. It works.
the part that I don't quite get,
Mm-hmm.
and let me double check this real quick. So the part with the Pro Bowl that I don't really understand is like Gardner Minshew's a Pro Bowler now. Like to me, I don't understand why the people who like Gardner Minshew's a Pro Bowler because Josh Allen wanted to play in a golf tournament this weekend.
Yeah.
Like this is what we're doing. And so to me, the issue with the Pro Bowl is how we're categorizing it. It's like Pro Bowls shouldn't ever be counted as far as like on somebody's Hall of Fame resume anymore then. Like if we're having dudes opt out to go play in a golf tournament for the weekend and that means they're not a Pro Bowler, like what does this even mean? Like
Yeah.
this
I mean,
is
I really do think that you're onto something there. I mean, I've felt that way about the Pro Bowl for the last decade. Honestly, it's like to say he's a blah 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 Super Bowl winner. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler. It's like, okay, well, whatever. Like to me, to say to me, he's like to me a more valuable award with the same weight, or at least the weight that used to mean something, is he's like a 5-time all NFL or all pro.
the
Uh
all pro.
all
Yeah.
pro receiver. Like to me, that's actually a more interesting. Like to me, that's actually the more weight of the accolade that Pro Bowl used to mean, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're onto something there because this like you're getting like Josh Allen in the record books is still a Pro Bowler, right? This year.
No.
Oh, he's not? Does that not how it works?
No. That's what I'm saying is that like
Interesting.
it does not record that way because he didn't participate in the Pro Bowl. And so
Interesting.
that I think is ridiculous. Is
Yeah.
that like it doesn't count because he didn't do it,
Well,
even though he was higher than the people behind him in terms of like ranking for it.
if it shouldn't count, if that's how they're gonna do it, then that's pretty rough for Josh Allen then anyway, because right now he's hurting for even a Super Bowl. And you got and once again it's you, Casen, pointing that out. But I digress. But anyway, regardless, man, I'm looking forward to the Pro Bowl. It's a fun. It's going to be a stressless weekend as far as checking that out. So, you have any other of the weeks?
I got one more here.
Let's go.
I've got a gambler of the week, and that goes to Brad Bohannon. If you're aware of who this person is.
No, but I'm about to do the search while
Um,
you tell me.
Brad Bohannon was the former head coach of the Alabama baseball team. And he got into a little trouble because he was he was calling somebody with inside information about his program so they could bet on his team.
Wow.
And they cited a specific example where he called a friend that, hey, my starting pitcher isn't going to be able to go today. So place as much as you can on LSU. And so let me know when you place the bet, and then I'll tell LSU that he's not going to be playing.
Hmm.
And so and this was like investigated and all this stuff, and apparently the guy that was like betting for him went to the sports book and was like hey, I'd like to place 100 grand on the Alabama LSU baseball game.
Wow.
And they were like, hang on, wait, what? And they were like, okay, we're not gonna let you do that. You can do 15. And he goes, hey, if you knew what I knew, you'd let me place as much as I can. And then he ended up apparently showing everybody at the sports book the text from Bohannon saying this guy's not playing.
Oh
So,
no.
and it's like the dumbest, like it's so.
Wow.
And so this guy ended up getting a 15-year show cause from the NCAA, and I think he got fined. He's on probation. I don't know if he's going to prison or what, but yeah, it's crazy.
Well, you lose your job and anyway. I mean, at that point you deserve to get caught. I'm sorry. Like that's, but I also will say that that's like when in like the Pete Rose stories of the year of the world and everything, at least in that situation, like he's actually like he's actually like in using the knowledge to at the detriment of his own team, right? So it's like,
Yeah, bet
oh
against my team because my pitcher's out. Like
yeah,
that's insane stuff.
yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, like if yeah, gambler of the week, riverboat gambler of the week, quite frankly. Um, yeah, I that's incredible. It takes my breath away, but at the same time, you're gonna start seeing more and more stories like this. I don't want to rehash it, but like the LSU player who's gotten in trouble, you know, for this stuff. I mean, I feel like this is gonna be. I feel like this is gonna become just like a who I won't go into it. Also got caught because of like idiotic reasons, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I was gonna bring it up like last week, but yeah,
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 it's been a story last like I think 2 weeks ago. But anyway, this is gonna become something that like we see more and more and more to where like these stories are gonna outdo themselves on one to scale and two probably to level of like idiocy that gets the people caught.
yeah.
But hey, you know what? They should get caught. Like we can't and we can't let it completely compromise the integrity of the sports, right? We agree on that.
Hmm.
So, all right, ready for movies?
Yeah, let's get into that.
So I wanted to talk about this. We're going to shift to our most anticipated movies of 2024. I wanted to talk about this, Casen, because last year we did an actual ranking. I didn't rank them this time. I actually wrote down like a good 7 films that I was just going to mention essentially, and then we talk about them at length as we want to, because not all of these are worth necessarily all going into.
Hmm.
And I just felt that since we didn't really compare our top movies to our most anticipated movies, it would be a more free flowing way to get into it. So
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I think that makes more sense because at least for me, I don't know about you, but it was like kind of pulling teeth to try and find a ton of movies that I was super interested in this year.
same,
I mean, partially because the Marvel slate's basically very non-existent
right?
outside of a very outside of one. um, but yeah, it's going to be a ton of other movies that I just don't have a huge amount of interest in. Um, but I'll probably end up seeing at some point.
Well, I assume let's do this. I assume a movie that's probably at the top of both of our lists is Deadpool 3.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that at the very end to close it up. Uh, throw an odd movie out there. You can throw a few out there
So
if you want.
I'll throw it out because it's coming out today. Right now, it's in theaters as of today. Tomorrow and Friday, when you're listening to it, you can go see it. Argyle.
Hey,
Um,
okay,
so Argyle, I really want to go see this movie, and I'm really intrigued by it just because of the situation that surrounds it. Because it's based on a book that doesn't exist, or like didn't exist when the movie came, or like when the movie was being made.
yeah,
And so, and there's a lot of people, like there's a lot of theories over there over because nobody knows who wrote the book because it's like a pen name that there's no real evidence that this person exists. Um, and so there's a lot of theories over who the author that came up with the story is.
interesting. I didn't know that. That is
Um,
fascinating.
that there are people who think it's Taylor Swift. There are people who think that it's J.K. Rowling. There are legitimate reasons for the Taylor Swift theories, but like probably not. J.K. Rowling is the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah,
Um, there's some other people theorized there, but it's got Bryce Dallas Howard. It's got a ton of other people that should be really fun. So I'll bring that up since it's out right now.
gotcha. I'll throw out an odd one here that I actually it's coming out hopefully end of the year, but essentially after our discussion on Napoleon, Gladiator 2 is supposed to come out this year, 2024.
Mhm.
Latest Ridley Scott film, who the man doesn't miss. Let's just be real. 80 years old, still making films. Um, the reason this fascinates me is just because Gladiator, one of my more favorite movies. It's classic, obviously, but at the same time, the first Gladiator is not a film that I would think would ever warrant a sequel. So it's going to be curious to see how they make a sequel. Very little is really known about it. As far as I know, it's not Maximus again. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. I definitely will be. There's also it also may not come out this year. So that was the other thing that people were talking about. So that's my first one I'll mention. You're up
The
next.
I haven't seen this. I haven't really heard much about it, but I heard about it when I was doing some research to do this, and I thought it sounded really interesting. Coming out April 4th or April 19th is The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard about this?
I have heard of this.
It's a Guy Ritchie movie starring Henry Cavill, uh, Carrie Elwes. It sounds interesting. It sounds fun. It sounds um like it could be, in it's sort of like a war film with maybe some humor involved. It's sort of Guy Ritchie. So I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I just read the little description here on the Rotten Tomatoes website. I can't say a lot of these words on this podcast, but you should totally go. You should totally go read what this film's about, because there's a few of my favorite movies mentioned in there.
Yeah, yeah.
You're looking at what I'm looking at. That's
Yep,
cool.
yep,
That's really
yep.
cool. Okay, one of these movies that I wanted to throw out that does come out this year, which again I think is going to test. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this movie because of the shift in what's happening with DC, with James Gunn taking over. We're supposed to get Joker 2 this year, and if
Mhm.
whatever you might know about Joker 2 is that Lady Gaga is going to be in it apparently as Harley Quinn, and it's supposed to be a musical. I again, there's so much stuff that's just bizarre from the moment this movie was announced to its filming to now. Obviously, the first Joker. I'll go ahead and admit something right here. I have not seen the first Joker. To be completely honest with you, the whole concept of the movie was not interesting to me. But the fact that it was like one of the highest, if not the highest, grossing rated R film of all time, at least until Deadpool 3 this summer, because that's gonna happen. Um, it just like I have seen movies that it's been compared to The King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, and I've heard it's basically those movies kind of wrapped together, but it's the Joker instead. Which, spoiler alert, if you know what I'm talking about, I won't get into it. But I may have to go see. I may have to eventually watch the Joker in its entirety to see this if it ends up the same phenomenon as the first one was, because I think with all of these side universes still going on in the DCU, like in the universe, and James Gunn's like greenlighting them, I still think DC is going to have the same problem they've always had. Like, what of this is canon? What of this is the continuity? Um, that's
Mhm.
really all I really have to say about it right now. Whole thing sounds weird, but like the fact that they're still greenlighting stuff like this is like, maybe we pull back. But I don't know. I'll let
I
you.
mean, I don't know for sure if the train could like be stopped by the time James Gunn got in there,
Right, for
because
this
I feel
movie,
like,
yes. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're right about that. To be fair, you're right about
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't really seen the first one either. I also just didn't really have an interest in it. But
Well, put my hat on from back then. The whole intrigue in the Joker is the fact that you don't know his origin story. He keeps
yeah,
mixing it up. That's the whole point. Giving him an actual origin story just makes him less interesting. But
yeah.
I feel the same way about the whole movie Solo. That shouldn't exist. But anyway, go ahead. Throw another one out there.
Um, another one. Let's just go with another random interesting one. Hitman.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you've heard about this one,
Is it based
but
on the
this
games?
one, no, it's not
Okay.
any. It's a different.
Okay.
It's not.
I gotcha. Gotcha.
Uh, it's a Richard Linklater movie.
Interesting.
Starring Glenn Powell. And it's I guess basically I guess about an undercover police officer who is posing as a hitman, uh, and ends up like breaking undercover to protect somebody. Is
It
I
is
guess
on
how
my.
that's gonna go.
I see it in front of me
So
here too. That's
yeah.
interesting. Okay. Okay.
So that comes out June 7th. I like Richard Linklater. He's one of my favorite directors. The one of my favorite movies of all time. Just out there, Boyhood.
Ah,
Check it out if you haven't. Richard Linklater, kind of like sort of like a alternate, like an independent style of directing. Richard Linklater filmed Boyhood with the same people over like time span of 12 years.
yeah. Boyhood was about where they followed a guy or a kid as he actually grew up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really about everybody. So it was
Oh
like
wow,
everybody that was
cool.
it was well, Ethan Hawke, Patricia Arquette and the kids, they filmed like a couple scenes every year for 12 years.
Wow,
And so you got to see the real actors age in real time. It was a super cool
that is awesome.
experience to
Yeah.
watch. So go check that out if you
I
haven't.
remember I remember the year that came out and finding out that that was the concept, and I was like, that is a really cool idea for a film. Hence why it
And
was
they,
up
they
for
didn't
Best
even
Picture.
announce they literally did not even announce this was a thing until the movie was coming out.
Right,
That
right.
like nobody even knew that they were doing this.
You're right. And it's just that's really awesome. To get a bit more wholesome, Inside Out 2 is supposed to come out June 14th of 2024.
Yeah.
I will say that when it comes to Pixar films, it is a top 5 for me, the first Inside Out. I mean, it is one of those films where both the premise and the execution of said premise are both done geniusly. It's
Hmm.
one of the very few films. I remember I ended up seeing that kind of on my own on like I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it kind of on my own. I kind of saw it after the fact it came out. And I always wanted to, but it wasn't one of those things where I was going to go and see an animated movie on my own. I think it came out in the middle of when the first one. I'm not going to look it up right now. I want to say it came out after I was out of college, and I did see it on my own, and obviously tearjerker, but also just so much in the way of mental health and just how you really can see the concept existing with all of us, and they're expanding on it. I kept thinking to myself, they'll find a way to do a sequel to it, and I think they're going to do it in a very like clever way. First little teaser trailers out.
Hmm.
It's very very good. It's like I said, the first like one of the few films where both the premise and the execution are done geniusly. And that cannot be said about very many movies. So Inside Out 2 this
Yeah,
summer.
definitely.
You're up next.
Um, Another weird one. We'll just go into here. I hadn't really heard about this until I think we're looking on the same list until I
Hmm.
saw it here. And it is uh Back to Black coming out May
Yeah,
10th.
that's on my list here. I was
Um,
going to bring that up. I had no idea this was coming out. Say what it's about.
so Back to Black is a biopic about Amy Winehouse.
Hmm.
And sort of her life and I would imagine there'll be a lot of I would imagine they'll probably go towards the end of her struggles as well, which could be uh a pretty
I
interesting,
I can see this being a tough watch.
dramatic. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a really brutal movie,
Yeah.
to be
I mean, if you
honest,
if you
but
know anything about Winehouse at the end of her life, just do your own research. If depending on how nitty gritty and into the details they're going to get on that, that could be an important but also tough watch.
yeah.
Because actually on that note, just to add, because that is also on my list, Casen. I was going to say, I do one day think that, like, in a world where we're always looking for content and they're looking for things to make movies about, I think one day they will make a movie about Mac Miller, um,
Hmm.
and other troubled artists that we've seen past, like Juice World and others, here recently, and it's and I think those stories are also very important to tell though as well because we saw things like Rocket Man, where if you haven't seen Rocket Man, one of the best music biopics I've seen, but Elton John pulls no punches of what his life was in that film, and luckily he's still with us to actually do that, right? And I think these stories about these artists that are not are also important, you know, barring their families sign off on it, right? So
Yeah. I mean, I just hope it's done well,
yeah,
for the respective of her family.
yep, her family and her herself, right? Um, Let me just see here. Okay, I do have one that's already being promoted, and I have a thing about it that I do want to say. You go ahead, and if
Hmm.
you already said yours, right? So I'll
Yeah,
say that was next for me, Back to Black. Dune Part 2 comes out relatively soon. I believe it comes out
yeah.
in March.
March 1st. March
Yeah.
1st.
Now, I did not see the first one, and so you might be thinking, well, Kellan, why are you anticipating the second movie? Well, dear listener, viewer, I'm waiting on the second one because I've heard from everyone the first one is a clear part one that has no context until you see the second one. So I'm like, cool. So once this comes out, I can see I can watch the first Dune where nothing will make sense, where they cut to black apparently, like, and it's like, well, what? That's it. And I can roll right into the second movie in the theater and go to see the second movie. I'm just like, oh, cool. Because I hear from basically everybody that like Dune has all the stuff in it that I would love from everyone, including from friend of the show Dylan, who's a big fan of the first
Mhm.
Dune. Um, it's just like I told him and others, I was like, I'm gonna wait until the second Dune comes out. I will also mention that this was one of the movies we should have gotten last year, but it was moved because of the
Mhm.
strikes. Yeah, I think we were supposed to get this in fall actually, and they were like, nope, spring.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That sounds right to me. And then I think also in March, Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire.
yeah.
Um,
Can I
yeah.
can I say that now I didn't see the new one with Paul Rudd, but apparently by most accounts it was good. They might have a new nucleus of really moving this franchise forward. I will say that the teaser trailer for that with like the ice coming in and like you see the ghost come forward and Paul Rudd's just holding like the holding like the ghost ectoplasmic thing and he's just like oh like he's just laughing. That makes me laugh every time I've seen it in theaters this past year. Like just Paul Rudd. I'm like, is Paul Rudd acting here, or is he actually like reacting how he would if he saw this, like even the special effects? Like, is he showing what the effect is, and he actually just reacting like a Ghostbusters nerd would? So
Probably
anyway,
both. Yeah,
yeah.
probably both.
Last one here. I'll mention before Deadpool 3 is the last one I have here. I don't want to get too into this because of its potential. I don't want to say ramifications, but like the offset of the concept is not a positive one. There's a movie coming out this year called Civil War, and it it's it's about a modern day Civil War. There is a trailer out there. I want to say it's an A24 film. Uh,
Mhm.
that may or may not be right, but it's from a director who makes films that are steeped in you know commentary of what's happening in real life and um the concept by which they're going to bring the United States to conflict, I don't know. I've just seen the trailer, but it's a movie that like of course they're making a movie like this and it's coming out in an election year because why not? But I'm more interested to see the conversation around it than I am the actual movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Because the movie could be complete
Mhm.
nonsense. I mean, I don't know. We've seen stuff like this happen before where it's like, oh, the reviews come out, it's like, oh, the movie's actually terrible. It's like, well, maybe it was just more to stir the pot than it was to actually
Yeah,
be good
yeah.
as a product, right? Anyway, that's all I wanted to say on that. So yeah, you got another
Uh,
one?
no. Should we just get a Deadpool?
Yeah, Deadpool 3 is probably would be the number one of both of our lists if we were going to rank them.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm glad that you're not the only one who had a little bit of an issue doing this. Uh,
Well, it's a tough year for stuff. Particularly stuff that we're both interested in.
we did just have
So
strikes though all through
yeah.
2023. I mean
Well,
that
yeah,
was
yeah. That's the large
yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So plus the stuff we're into is being more spaced out. But Deadpool 3 obviously comes out this year. Is there a date on that? Is it like middle
July
of the year?
26th.
Right in the middle of the summer. So uh what hasn't been said about this film and who hasn't been leaked to actually be in this? Leaked slash teased. Because
Hmm.
you could tell me some random celebrity is in this and I'd be like, sure, they could show up. I mean, and anyone who's just a friend of Ryan Reynolds at this point and happens to be near set, like, hey, you want to be in a scene? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah.
Um, I will go ahead and just say that one of the earliest cameos that it was floating around was that Taylor Swift could cameo as Dazzler in the
Hmm.
film. I actually think that would be a spectacular cameo for her and as being an MCU person because if you're not aware, Dazzler is a mutant that essentially uses her ability to become a pop star. So, and if you ever seen like the classic comic design of her, it looks like modern day Taylor Swift, right? So, Aside from that, though, um, we're most all excited for Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, right?
Yeah.
I never thought we would get this. I never thought we would get the two of them on screen together, him in his old suit, Wolverine that is. And regardless of the concept, I really think that he's gonna. I don't know what Deadpool's gonna do in this film, but I think him and Logan are gonna somehow bring the X-Men into the house.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll
and
see.
I think that I think this in no way takes away from what Logan means.
I agree.
I mean, it's I think it's a different Wolverine. It's a different universe's Wolverine. Just also played by Hugh Jackman. And so like the main Fox X-Men Wolverine with Hugh Jackman is still intact with Logan. It's just I think that we'll get the character dynamic and banter that we've been craving for because I mean he's been making jokes about X-Men since the first one or about Hugh Jackman since the first
Yeah,
one.
he has. I'm one of those people that quick just review, like not review, but first Deadpool is an absolute classic. I think the second one's also a classic, but
Mhm.
I think the story is better in the first movie. The set because it's more self-contained. The second movie is actually funnier, and the story's not as good, is my opinion. But they're still both great movies.
Mhm.
Um, this is going to be more his introduction of like to the MCU and stuff like that. But I still think they're going to keep it in the pocket of no, but this is the third Deadpool. Like, and I think it's gonna be awesome. Plus, it's just nice to know that Ryan Reynolds is gonna want to be a staple and beat his character for long term because we would have never gotten him on cinema if it wasn't for him. And on top of that, I need this movie to make $1 billion so that that money can go towards helping Wrexham. So chop chop.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say I was like, yeah, he's got transfer fees to pay, so he's
Yeah,
he's got to keep making more movies.
I need
He's
this movie to
he's
make like $2 billion.
he's got a football club to fund.
Wrexham overseas. But we'll talk more about it as it gets closer because I'm sure. I mean, the first trailer is going to go viral. Like I have no doubt. The first actual trailer.
Mhm.
I really just hope that they know not to show too much. But with all that's been teased with this film and talked about and joked about, and some of it's probably not even true, they could probably put together a really good trailer, and we haven't seen anyone, and we haven't seen anything. Like
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I got. Been a longer show than I anticipated, but I'm glad we went through that, man.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we'll be back next week to preview the Super Bowl.
Indeed,
Um,
indeed. Try to enjoy the Pro Bowl, everybody. Let us know your most anticipated movies of 2024. Uh, what I'm gonna enjoy the Pro Bowl. Actually, more to the point, enjoy NHL All Star Weekend because isn't that also this weekend?
it might be. Yeah, I'm not sure.
He doesn't even know off the top of his head.
I don't know.
I will literally look it up right now. Yep, it's this weekend. So you got dueling.
Okay.
I'm actually low key more interested in that. As I shout out the Penguins. I love the skill competition. What can I say? But regardless, hey, Casen, any final thoughts?
Um, yeah, I mean, the only final thoughts I have are we didn't really talk about it, but I wanted to get your thoughts on if you heard anything about the Providence drama.
No, I don't even know what you're referring to. But go
The
ahead.
so are you familiar with Jeff Goodman,
Yes,
the basketball reporter?
yes.
Did you hear at all about what happened with him this week?
No, let's hear it.
Okay, okay. I mean, long story short, he just got into a Twitter fight. So some anonymous like troll account made some documentary about Providence basketball, and it was essentially like a hate video against Ed Cooley for leaving Providence, and it was essentially like a fake video because it was a bunch of people like gossiping about fake stories just about like I mean you can look into it to get actual details about the things that he's alleging Ed Cooley did or was involved
First,
in.
dude, the first headline I see just says Jeff Goodman is having a very bad week.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the first
yeah.
that's the
And
first
so
headline.
and so the problem is that this guy somehow got just all-time king John Fanta to be in this video. So I don't know if you
Wow.
know who John Fanta is, but John Fanta is Big East basketball. I don't know if I think he's employed by the conference maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like the guy when you think of Big East basketball reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And so John Fanta somehow was um tricked into doing this like troll movie documentary thing. And so he's in here talking in like in the video he talks about Ed Cooley and Providence from like a legitimate like actual reporting perspective.
Yeah.
But then there's a bunch of other like wild allegations and libel spewed in here between them. And so people were coming at John Fanta for being involved in this. And so Jeff Goodman was trying to protect John Fanta, and he ended up like just yelling at this guy in the DMs for making this movie. And he's getting dragged pretty hard for it.
Jeez. Wow.
So
That would have been a really good news story for Short Six Pack. Because I would have been sitting here thinking, well, this is bizarre. This is really, really weird.
it's a very bizarre headline.
Yeah.
And it's one of those that like it's just so college basketball. Like these two college basketball reporters are roped into a scandal with some troll account that hates Providence or that hates Ed Cooley.
That's a
Because
that's a 2024 headline if I've ever heard one. So that's
yeah.
My immediate thoughts about that as we close the show out are don't engage. Just let it go. These troll accounts only say like because this is exactly what happens. It never leads a direction where you look good. Like
Yeah.
by responding. Like I don't know. So where is Lou Holtz right now? Same energy. That's where I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. That's all I got. Oh man, that's great. I know. I see. That's a good way to bookend it, man. That's you with the hat on. All right, appeasing to the Death Star.
All right.
This is Kellan,
This is Casen.
and we'll see you as always at the next stop.